I was running on fumes, literally and figuratively. My boots dragged against the gritty tiles of Ridgeway Market, still caked with dust from the shop. 10 hours of bent axles, burnt coffee, and a busted transmission that refused to stay put. My back ached, my hands smelled like steel and grease, and my only plan for the evening was to grab a frozen pizza and maybe a six-pack, then sink into the couch without saying a word to anyone. That's when I saw her. Sadie. It was like being punched by a memory. She stood near the end of aisle 5 by the shelves lined with baby food jars and formula. Her hair was tucked beneath a knit beanie, but I'd know her walk anywhere, brisk and light, like she was always late for something. She was pushing a stroller with one hand and balancing a shopping basket with the other, her old winter coat hanging a little loose off her frame. I stopped cold. My breath caught before I even realized it. She hadn't changed much. Not on the outside, at least. Same sharp jawline, same tiny silver hoop in one ear, same tense shoulders. But something about the way she moved, that extra caution in her eyes, the tight grip on the stroller made her seem guarded. Like she was hiding. She saw me before I could duck away. Her eyes widened just for a second. No smile. No wave. No fake, hey, long time. Just this flicker of something, fear, maybe? Regret. Then it was gone. She looked away quickly, adjusted the strap on her purse, and turned her back on me like I was a stranger on the street. I should have walked away. I should have let her go. But I couldn't. I kept walking, pretending to browse the freezer aisle. But my eyes stayed locked on her as she inched toward the registers. And then I saw it. The kid, maybe 2 years old if that, was holding something. A small silver object dangling from a plastic ring. He twisted it in his chubby fingers and gave it a curious little shake. And when the light hit it just right, I saw it. A wrench. Not a real one. A tiny metal replica, smooth and polished, attached to a worn leather loop. My heart slammed into my ribs. That was my keychain. I made it back when we were still together, just fooling around in the shop late one night, shaping it from scrap metal for fun. I even etched our initials on the underside with a soldering iron. I lost it sometime before she left, searched everywhere, even tore the apartment apart. She said she hadn't seen it. Shrugged it off like it didn't matter. But there it was. In that little boy's hands. Her boy. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. I needed a closer look. Needed to be sure. Sadie must have noticed. She snatched the trinket from his fingers so fast the kid flinched. She didn't look at me. Just shoved the keychain deep into her coat pocket, mumbled something under her breath, and made a beeline for the sliding doors. She didn't even pay for the stuff in her basket. I stood there frozen, one hand still gripping a half-melted pizza, watching her disappear into the late afternoon crowd. Everything in me felt twisted. Confused. Wrecked. I walked out without buying anything. The sky outside was washed in gray, the kind of pale dust that made everything look drained. I scanned a lot, but I couldn't spot her. She was gone. Just like before. I got into my truck and sat with my hands on the wheel, the engine silent. My mind reeled with questions I wasn't ready to answer. That wrench-shaped keychain was no coincidence. She'd left almost 2 years ago, no warning, no explanation, just a voice memo that said she needed space. I never understood it. We fought, sure, but nothing like that. One night she was there, the next, gone. No note. No bags. No trace. Now here she was with a child. A toddler. Holding something from our past like it had never left her pocket. And if that kid was hers? If that keychain was mine? That little boy might be mine, too. It was the kind of thought that doesn't land all at once. It hits in pieces. Like realizing too late that a car has run a red light. You see the shape of it, but your brain won't let you process the impact until it's already happened. I sat there for I don't know how long, the keychain burned into my mind, the image of the kid's face, soft cheeks, bright eyes, dark hair, turning over and over in my head like a loop I couldn't turn off. There'd been signs back then. Clues I never connected. The late-night crying fits. The sudden silences. That girl's night she went on where she came back without her ring and didn't say a word for 2 days. I didn't push her. I thought maybe she needed time. Maybe I was a fool. Because now it all pointed to one brutal possibility: Sadie didn't just leave me. She left with something of ours. And she never told me. Not once. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. But I knew one thing for damn sure: I wasn't imagining that keychain. I wasn't imagining that look on her face. Something was off. Deeply off. And I wasn't going to let it go this time. Not again. I barely slept that night. Back at home, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the scuff marks on the hardwood floor. The apartment was too quiet, like always. No hum of another person moving around, no soft shuffle of shared life. Just me and the echo of 100 questions I wasn't ready for. But one by one, the pieces started falling into place. Things I buried or shrugged off, they came flooding back. It started with that night 2 years ago. The one I told myself not to think about. Sadie had gone out for a girls' night, said she was meeting up with Chelsea and some of the others from her job. She seemed tense, almost jumpy. I remember the way she adjusted her earrings 3 times in the mirror, kept checking her phone like she was waiting for someone to cancel. But I didn't say anything. Didn't want to be the husband, the clingy one. So I kissed her cheek, told her to have fun, and stayed back watching a ball game. She didn't come home that night. Around 1 a.m. I texted her. Nothing. Tried calling straight to voicemail. At 3, I convinced myself she must have just crashed at a friend's place, maybe had too much to drink. At 5, I was wide awake and pacing, staring at the front door like it might open on its own. She showed up at 8 in the morning. No makeup, red eyes, clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them, which she probably had. She stood outside the door like a stranger, holding her shoes in one hand and nothing else. No purse. No keys. No explanation. She didn't say a word. Just stared at me. I should have asked questions. Should have demanded answers. But I didn't. Instead, I opened the door, stepped aside, and let her in. She took a long shower, went straight to bed, and by that evening it was like nothing had happened. I tried to talk to her gently, asked if everything was okay. She just nodded, gave me a small smile, and told me she was tired. I let it go. I didn't want to start a fight. Didn't want to believe she'd done anything wrong. I convinced myself there was some reasonable explanation. That she'd talk when she was ready. But she never did. And a week later, she started pulling away. Slowly, at first, like shadows stretching at sunset. She worked late more often. Got quieter. Her touch changed, less warm, more routine. And then the little things started popping up. A smudge of unfamiliar lipstick on a tissue in the bathroom trash. Scented lotion that wasn't hers. A gray sock under the couch, men's, size 10, definitely not mine. She claimed it must have been left by her brother when he visited, but I couldn't remember him ever sitting on our couch. When I brought it up, she laughed it off. Told me I was overthinking. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Because what was the alternative? That the person I trusted most had been lying? That our marriage was already broken and I was the last to notice? Still, things got weirder. One night, I found her phone buzzing on the nightstand. A message popped up from a name I didn't recognize, Ryan. She snatched it up before I could read the rest. Said it was about work. Her boss, maybe? But her voice cracked when she said it. I should have pushed. I didn't. Maybe I didn't want to know. And then one morning, she was just gone. I woke up to an empty bed. No note. No call. Her closet half empty. A few drawers left open. My keychain missing. Only thing she left behind was a 13-second voice memo on my phone. I need space, Luke, her voice said. Calm but distant. Don't try to find me. I'm sorry. That was it. And I obeyed. Like a fool, I obeyed. I spent the next year stumbling through grief and confusion. I told myself maybe she'd had some sort of breakdown. Maybe she needed to rediscover herself. Every friend and relative I asked had the same answer. I don't know where she is, man. Some of them didn't even seem surprised. Maybe they knew something I didn't. Now, sitting in that apartment, staring at the spot where her shoes used to pile up by the door, I felt like a fog had finally lifted. The wrench keychain. The boy. Her frozen look at the store. It wasn't just a breakup. She hadn't just left me. She'd left with a child. A child who had probably been growing inside her when she vanished. My mind played back the timeline, trying to make sense of it. If she left nearly 2 years ago and that kid was what, maybe 1.5? That lines up. Pregnancy would have started right around the time of that girl's night. The one she never came home from. And all those little things, the tears, the distance, the gray sock, the missed calls, they weren't random. They were the beginning of something she didn't have the courage to admit. I felt sick. Betrayal has a way of wrapping itself around you like barbed wire. It's not just the lies that hurt. It's the erasure, the realization that someone you loved made a decision that cut you out of something sacred. I wasn't just grieving my marriage anymore. I was grieving the possibility that I'd missed the first steps, first words, first everything of my own kid, because she decided I didn't deserve to know. I stood up too fast, knocking over the chair. My hands were shaking, my breath shallow. I needed answers. I needed to see her, to see him again. I couldn't live in the dark another second. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts, heart pounding. Somewhere in there, tucked between names I hadn't touched in years, was a guy named Phil. A buddy who owed me a favor or two. Used to work with a guy in property records. The kind of guy who could find things. I tapped his number. Phil, it's Luke. I need to find someone. Phil came through faster than I expected. By the next afternoon, I had an address. Don't ask how, he'd said over the phone, voice low like we were still in high school pulling off some prank. Let's just say her name showed up on a utilities record. Out in Westbrook. Duplex. Not much else. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the note I'd scribbled down. 63B Birchview Lane. Felt surreal. Like I wasn't supposed to have this knowledge. Like I'd cracked open a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. But ready or not, I was already pulling on my jacket. The drive across town felt longer than it should have. I kept glancing at the side mirror, half expecting her car to pass by going the opposite direction. The weather was in that strange mid-March limbo, not winter anymore, but still too cold to call it spring. Bare trees lined the road like skeletons, gray and indifferent. When I pulled up to the house, IK** led the engine and sat for a second, gripping the wheel. The duplex was small, clean, tan siding, green trim, 2 bikes leaning against the porch railing. Wind chimes swayed lazily near the door, making the kind of soft metallic sound that instantly triggered memories of weekends spent trying to fix that old chime she'd loved back when we still had a shared front porch. Before she took silence with her when she left. I knocked. Footsteps. A pause. Then the door opened. A man stood there. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair, average build. He was holding a dish rag and looked at me like I might have been selling something. Or maybe worse, like he already knew who I was. Can I help you? His voice wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't warm either. Guarded. I'm looking for Sadie, I said. I think she lives here? His eyes flickered just a second before he stepped back. Sadie, he called into the house. Someone's here for you. I heard movement inside. Then she appeared. Sadie walked into the doorway like she was walking into court. She was barefoot, wearing a hoodie and jeans, hair pulled back into a messy knot. No makeup, no smile, just a wide-eyed stare that said everything. She hadn't expected to see me. Not now, maybe not ever. Luke, she said, her voice flat. The man turned to her, then back to me. I'll give you 2 a minute, he muttered, and walked off down the hallway. I waited. She didn't invite me in, just stood there, one hand gripping the doorframe. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away, just looked at her. Really looked at her. She looked tired. Not in the way someone looks after a bad night's sleep. The kind of tired that lives deep in the bones. I saw you, I said finally, at Ridgeway, yesterday. Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of something. Guilt, recognition, panic, flashing across her face. With the boy, I continued, and the wrench keychain. That did it. She blinked, then turned away. You should go. I'm not going anywhere, I said, stepping forward. You have a son, and you're walking around with something you told me you lost 2 years ago. You want to explain that? She didn't speak, just stood there with her back to me, arms folded. After a moment, she stepped aside and let me in. The inside of the house was cozy, modest, clean, full of life I hadn't known existed. Toys in a corner basket, a crayon drawing on the fridge, a faint scent of peanut butter and lavender. It didn't look like a secret. It looked like a home. I sat on the edge of the couch, unsure if I was supposed to. Sadie stayed near the wall, arms crossed like a barrier. The boy, I said slowly. Is he mine? Her eyes met mine then, and something in her softened. Just a fraction. But enough. She nodded. Yes. I felt the air leave my lungs. Why didn't you tell me? She looked down. Because I didn't know. You didn't know? Sadie ran a hand through her hair and finally moved to sit on the arm of a nearby chair. When I left, I didn't know I was pregnant. Not at first. I wasn't trying to hurt you. She stopped. I was confused. Things between us were already unraveling. That night, the girls' night, it wasn't what I said it was. And when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't know who the father was. The words hit like cold water. I didn't interrupt. There was someone else, she said, quieter now. Ryan. We were close. It happened once. Around that same time. And when the test came back, I panicked. I didn't want to face you. Or tell you. Or ruin both your lives. So you left. She nodded. And you built this whole life without me. Her eyes glistened. Ryan wanted to raise him. Regardless of who the father was. He said it didn't matter. But it did matter, I said. Because he's mine. Sadie didn't argue. How long have you known? She swallowed hard. We did a test. A few months ago. And you still didn't tell me? I was going to, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Eventually. That word eventually rang in my ears like a cruel joke. You don't get to decide that, I said. You don't get to erase me. She didn't respond. I stood up, walking toward the wall where a few framed photos hung. There he was. The boy. Probably taken in the park, sitting on a blanket with a toy truck. His eyes were bright. He had my nose. My chest ached. What's his name? Drew. I nodded, the name sinking into my bones like a truth I didn't know I'd been waiting for. You stole this from me. I didn't mean it. No, I said, turning back. You don't get to say you didn't mean when you moved on with another man and cut me out of my own son's life. Her lip trembled, but she held her ground. Ryan reappeared quietly in the hallway. I think you should leave, he said. I ignored him. I want to see him. Sadie looked to Ryan, then back to me. Please, I said. I just want to meet my son. She hesitated. Finally, she nodded once. Not today, she said. But soon. That night, I couldn't sit still. I cleaned the kitchen twice. Rearranged the tools in my truck bed. Stared at the same 5 photos of Sadie on my phone, wondering what the hell I had missed. But nothing filled the hole that had opened inside me, a strange, aching space between what was and what could have been. I had a son. A son who'd taken his first steps, maybe even said his first word, without me. A little boy who was probably learning to hold a spoon and count to 3 while I was neck-deep in transmission fluid, clueless. I'd missed everything. Because Sadie had decided it was easier to erase me than face the truth. But now that I knew, now that it was real, I wasn't about to stand on the sidelines. First thing the next morning, I called a lawyer. Not to sue, not to scream, just to understand what rights I had. Turns out, without a formal acknowledgement or DNA test, I didn't have much. Nothing really. Just a faint hope and a wrench-shaped keychain. So I made the call. Sadie, I said when she answered. I want a test. Official. Legal. No more maybe. There was a pause. Then quietly, okay? The test was scheduled for the following week. Neutral clinic. No drama. When I arrived, they had us fill out forms separately. I sat in a cold plastic chair with a clipboard in my lap, listening to Drew's tiny voice echo from the hallway as he babbled nonsense to himself. Sadie was there, of course, she had to be, but she barely looked at me. Ryan came too, and that stung more than I expected. The nurse swabbed Drew's mouth, then mine. It took 5 minutes. No blood, no pain. Just a sterile silence between us that felt more cutting than any argument we could have had. I'll let you know as soon as we get the results, Sadie said, her voice clipped. I nodded. Thanks. We didn't hug. We didn't speak again. I drove home with my jaw clenched so tight I gave myself a headache. The waiting was the worst part. For days of circling the same thoughts, waking up from dreams where Drew ran toward me, laughing only to vanish before I could catch him. Then the email came. I opened it with shaking hands. Paternity confirmed. 99.98% probability of biological relationship. The room tilted. I sat down, the document trembling in my lap. There it was. Clear as day. Scientific proof of what I already knew in my gut. Drew was mine. And yet, the confirmation didn't come with a parade. No celebration. No welcome mat rolled out in front of me. Just a heavy, quiet realization. Now what? I waited a day before knocking on her door again. This time, Ryan answered. He looked at me differently now. Not like a stranger. Not like a threat. More like a rival he couldn't dismiss anymore. We got the results, I said. He nodded. Yeah. I saw. Can I come in? He didn't move. Just studied me, weighing whatever he was about to say. Then, Sadie's not ready to talk. I'm not here to fight, I said. I just need to see her. We need to figure out next steps. He stepped back, barely, and I walked in. Sadie was in the living room, sitting on the couch with a folded blanket in her lap. Like she'd been waiting for bad news. She didn't look up. I read the results, she said. I guess. That settles it. That's all you've got? What do you want me to say, Luke? She snapped, standing. That I'm sorry? That I regret everything? That I wish I could take it all back? You think I haven't already thought that 1,000 times? No, I said. I don't think you have. If you had, you would have told me the moment you knew. I was scared. She**T back. You don't get to decide how I handled it. But you decided I didn't get a choice, I said, my voice rising. You and Ryan decided. You built this whole life around a lie. Ryan stepped forward. That's enough. No. I cut him off. You don't get to speak for him. I raised him, he said. I've been there every night. Every tantrum, every milestone. I've earned the right. And I'm not trying to take that from you, I said honestly. But you can't erase blood. You can't erase me. Sadie looked between us, her expression tight. I did what I thought was best, she said. For him. No, I said quietly. You did what was easiest. You picked the version of life that didn't have me in it. Silence. I stepped back, heart pounding. I'm not here to blow up your life, I said. I just want a chance to be his father. Sadie didn't answer. I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, I heard her voice. We'll start with a visit, she said. 1 hour. Supervised. At the park. Saturday. I turned. She met my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something almost like remorse. Okay, I said. Then I left. The air outside felt heavier than when I walked in. Not because I was defeated, but because I knew nothing about this would be easy. I had a son, and I was starting from zero, but it was a start, and that was something. Saturday came with gray skies and a breeze that tugged at jacket sleeves. I arrived at the park early, pacing the paved loop near the playground like a man waiting for a verdict. My hands wouldn't stop fidgeting, rubbing over my jeans, curling into fists. I had no idea what I was supposed to bring to something like this. Snacks? Conversation? A smile that didn't look forced? I settled on a toy truck, one I'd built from leftover scrap in the shop. Real metal, rubber wheels, smooth blue paint. I'd handbrushed myself. I hadn't made it for anyone in particular at the time. Maybe I just missed the idea of building something that mattered. Now it had a purpose. At exactly 10 on the dot, I saw them coming. Sadie pushed a stroller down the gravel path, her steps steady, her posture stiff. Drew walked beside her, one hand barely gripping the stroller's side. He wore a green puffer jacket and tiny Velcro sneakers, his dark hair sticking up in that stubborn toddler way. I froze. He looked even smaller in person. Not fragile, just unfiltered, pure. The kind of presence that demands the world slow down around it. Sadie stopped a few feet away. Hi, she said, guarded. Hi, I replied, glancing at Drew. Hey there, buddy. Drew stared up at me, big eyes, curious, completely blank with recognition. I knelt slowly, careful not to get too close. I brought you something, I said, holding out the truck. He took it. That part was easy. His small hands gripped the edges, turning it slowly. He made a soft vroom sound, then promptly sat down in the grass and began rolling it back and forth. I looked up at Sadie, who gave the faintest shrug. He likes trucks. Good taste, I murmured. We stood in silence for a while. Drew played, focused entirely on the movement of wheels and dirt. I tried to keep my breathing normal, but every time I looked at him, something inside me curled tight, like a spring winding too fast. His nose was mine, his ears too. He had Sadie's mouth, but the way he furrowed his brow when concentrating, that was all me. So, I said, watching him, what's he into, besides trucks? Sadie hesitated. He likes puzzles, strawberry yogurt. He's learning colors. And me? I asked before I could stop myself. What did you tell him I am? She looked down. I haven't told him much. He's still young. He doesn't really ask. My stomach sank. I nodded slowly. Okay. We drifted over to the bench, keeping Drew in view. He didn't look up once. For the next 20 minutes, I sat beside my ex-wife in a quiet park while the son I never knew I had played with a gift I'd made from old bolts and paint. Every now and then, he'd glance at me. Not in fear, but like I was just another adult on the edges of his world. A man with a beard and a nervous smile. "He's shy," Sadie said, as if that explained it all. "I'm a stranger," I replied. Neither of us said anything for a long time. At one point, Drew tripped over a bump in the grass. I moved instinctively, half rising, but Sadie was already there. She scooped him up, brushed off his knees, kissed the top of his head. He clung to her like she was the whole world. And in that moment I saw it. The whole life they'd built without me. She hadn't just been hiding him. She'd been protecting him fiercely, quietly, maybe even from me. And while I hated the way she did it, I couldn't unsee the bond they had. I was a visitor. An outsider in boots and a ball cap. When the hour ended, Sadie stood. "Okay, Drew," she said gently. "Time to go." He didn't argue. Just grabbed her hand, dragging the truck behind him like a forgotten thought. I watched them walk away. My throat was tight, my jaw set. But then, halfway down the path, Drew turned. He looked at me. Just for a second. No smile. No wave. Just a look. Quiet. Puzzled. Maybe curious. Then he turned back and they disappeared around the bend. I stayed on that bench until my hands went numb. This was going to take time. Maybe more than I wanted to admit. Maybe more than Sadie would give me. But I was in. I was all in. The message came 3 days after the park visit. She asked about the man with the truck. That's all it said. But I read it at least 20 times. Not the man in the boots, not the guy from the bench. The man with the truck. It was small. But it was a start. From then on, Saturdays became sacred. At first, the visits were awkward, not tense, just uncertain. Drew would eye me from across the swing set, cautious. Sadie would sit nearby, always watching, arms crossed like she was ready to step in if something went sideways. I showed up every time. Rain or shine. Sometimes with new toys, sometimes with just stories or silly impressions that made him giggle behind cupped hands. Over the weeks, something shifted. Drew began to approach me on his own. He'd tug on my sleeve or shove a leaf in my face like it was treasure. He started to mimic how I walked, boots heavy on gravel. He began calling me Tractor. I guess the boots reminded him of one. I didn't correct him. Ryan stopped showing up. Maybe it was by design, or maybe he just couldn't handle watching something inevitable unfold. Sadie still came, still hovered. But even her posture softened. We didn't talk much. But I noticed the way she'd sometimes watch us play, her mouth slightly open like she was seeing a movie she didn't remember directing. Drew was growing fast. One week it was yogurt preferences, the next it was a sudden fear of thunder that had him clutching my hand under a covered slide. He fidgeted with his sleeves when nervous, something I used to do as a kid. I started keeping notes on my phone. I didn't want to forget any of it. This wasn't just bonding anymore. It was undoing. It was replacing something that never got the chance to form. It happened in a bookstore. I'd taken Drew there on a whim. He liked looking at picture books and pretending he could read. We were sitting on the carpet in the kids section, flipping through a story about construction trucks. He pointed to a drawing of a mechanic and said, "That's Tractor's job, right?" I froze. Sadie, sitting a few feet away, looked up from her phone. I didn't respond right away. Just nodded slowly. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "That's my job." He grinned and went back to flipping pages. Like it was no big deal. Like recognizing that I belonged in his world was as natural as pointing at a stop sign. When we left the store, he grabbed my hand. And then, without warning, he hugged me. It was clumsy, toddler arms around my legs, head pressed to my hip, but it stopped me in my tracks. I looked up at Sadie. She'd frozen mid-step, watching with an expression I couldn't name. Not regret. Not relief. Just stillness. She had spent so long building a world that didn't include me. A careful, curated life with her and Ryan and a boy who never knew what he was missing. Now she was watching as that world shifted. Not through lawyers or arguments, but through one quiet moment in a bookstore. Something real. Something irreversible. And she knew. We all knew. Nothing would be the same after that.